Hello, it's me, Mike, with HBDS. I'll be reading Genesis 29 in this video and going through Genesis 29 line by line and discussing it, seeing whatever the Holy Spirit brings to my words. So before I get started, I'll go ahead and say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Please give me this day my daily bread, and forgive me of my debt, as I forgive those in debt to me. And Lord, lead me not into temptation, but instead deliver me from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom of power and glory, Lord, forever and ever. Amen. So, let's see, we're in chapter 29, and I'm reading the little headings. Chapter 29, we're going to come across where Jacob comes to the well of Haran. Jacob meets Rachel by the well, and then we'll see what happens between Jacob now that he's gonna make it out there to Haran. So he's gonna make it out to where, keep in mind he's never been out here. He doesn't, he's doesn't necessarily know where exactly his mother came from. Obviously, these are different times. You got to keep that in mind. He didn't just make trips out here every holiday, on a plane or on a boat or on a train or anything like that. They got a car, so we're gonna see him make it out there, and we'll see what happens to him, um, and see what happens about the whole situation. Because just making it out there, you'll see, is kind of a miracle to him. He's gonna realize how miraculous this thing that he can even make it out there, never knowing, and he makes it. So. Let me go ahead and read through it. Genesis 29. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot, until all the flocks be gathered together. Until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice, and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and flesh, and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of that place, and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for and Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? And Laban said, It must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service, which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week. And he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid. And he went in us also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. So that's Genesis 29. I read through Genesis 29. And so, like we said, we see turns out Jacob makes it out there to that well in Haran. He makes it out there just fine. He finds his his long relatives, distant relatives from his mother's side. And once again, this is in a time that he's doing it all on foot. Never been there. Can't really be sure if he's making it out to. I mean, they don't have compasses. They don't have they probably don't even have maps entirely at this point in history. They probably also don't, they don't got GPS. They don't got none of that. He's just a shot in the dark. And that's why in the last chapter, it's such a huge deal that God popped out right there when he did it at Bethel, and he told Jacob, not only are you going to make it out there, you're going to come right back, no problem. I'm going to be with you. And that's why it was such a big deal, and it was such a big confidence booster for for Jacob. But let me go ahead and we'll go through this line by line, and we'll see more of what's going on here. So he gets out there, like I said, he's on his journey, and he makes it out there. He somehow, doesn't really tell you how long it took him, but he gets out there. He's talking around. He asks the people, and look, there's a well in a field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, right? So he finds this well, and there's a big old rock on this road. There's a great stone upon the well, so they're covering it up with the stone. A big stone that needs to somehow be moved in order for this well, for people to get into this well, right? And so that's where they go. So he's taking a look at it, right? Water the sheep, and thither where the flocks get. So he's just explaining that that's where they go, and they roll the stone, they water the sheep, and then they put the stone back on. So that's how they keep like the well regulated or clean or something. For some reason they're closing it up, and I don't own a well, and I don't really work with wells, so I don't know, but I do understand the importance of, say, for example, covering up water, keeping it in a covering. So that's what's going on here. They got a big stone, and people need to move that stone, but they do it. And when they do it, that's when everybody comes and waters the sheep, but they don't, and then they close it back up. And so that's why he asked these guys, where y'all guys from? What country am I in? What country am I in? And they said, of Haran are we. We're from Haran. Oh, and he says, oh, great. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Haran. Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, yep, yeah, we know that guy. And he asks them, "Oh, great! Is he doing all right?" And they tell him, "Yep, he's doing just fine." And in fact, look, here's his daughter coming right now. That's Rachel. That's his daughter. And so he said, "Oh, wow." And he goes, "It is yet day, neither is it time." And he says, "So it is high day. It's noon. Neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep and go and feed them." So he's telling them, "Look, what are you doing out here?" Well, let's see. Neither it's not. It's noon, and the cattle should be gathered to. I'm not really seeing what's going on. Water ye the sheep and go and feed them. And so he's telling them, "Why aren't y'all watering the sheep?" Is what it sounds like. In fact, let me pull out a different. Hold on. Ow. I've got my trusty other versions. Got some other versions here, and I've been jumping to this New Living Translation. If you could see that, I just kind of bent the corner on it, but this NLT's got an interesting. I'm not entirely sure it's the most accurate. I think I've come across already a line or two that I didn't really necessarily agree with, but I'll go ahead and take a look. I'm in Genesis 29:7, right? And it just has this version has a much more modern context, I suppose. It has a much more modern wording, and that's why it seems to be like in this one. It seems like he's telling them it's noon, but it's not the time that you should be getting the cattle together. Why aren't you watering the sheep and feeding the sheep? And so that's why I want to make sure that let's see what they have to say. 29:7 here in this NLT over here reads, Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. Genesis 29:7. That's a very different. Here comes chapter 6. Oh, I read 9 and I'm looking at 7. That's me. Jacob said, "Look, it's still broad daylight. Too early to round up the animals. Yeah, it's too early to round up the cattle. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can be put out to pasture? Why aren't you watering?" He goes, "It's why it's not time to get all the animals together for the end of the night. Go. Why aren't y'all watering and feeding these animals?" And they said, "We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep." So we can't because there's big rocks right there, and we got to wait for them to move it. So that's what they're telling them. Uh, and so while he yet spake with them, here comes Rachel. So he's still talking with them, and here comes Rachel with her father's sheep, for she kept him. And it came to pass when Jacob saw, so she shows up, and he's kind of wondering, "Why don't you guys move the rock?" "Well, we got to wait until the shepherds come. These guys are the special guys or whatever." And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter, here comes Rachel with the sheep, that Jacob went near. So Jacob goes up there and he rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock. So for some reason, it seems like Jacob takes it upon himself to move the rock. So let me go ahead and take a look right here. Yeah, because like I said, NLT verse 9, 28:9. Now, this was the one I was reading earlier. Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. And then going into verse 10, it says, "And because Rachel was his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brothers, and because the sheep and goats belonged to his uncle Laban, Jacob went over to the well and moved the stone from its mouth and watered his uncle's flock." So you see what I'm getting at. This NLT kind of throws in a lot there, but it does kind of come to the conclusion that I just came to the conclusion of. Basically, he takes it upon himself, and they're waiting for these shepherds. They need animals, apparently. They need to get these animals, and these animals need to be harnessed together, and they need to strap around the rock, and they need to move the rock, and somebody's got to be there to supervise the whole thing, right? And to make the animals do this. So clearly that's something that Jacob's probably, he's done it before. It's something that he knows how to do. And there he is. He's kind of taking some authority here. He's saying, "Look, he meets Rachel, and he takes their animals, and he moves the rock from the stone, and he starts to water all the flock. He waters the flock. So before the guys even showed up, there he was, and he goes ahead and takes it upon himself to do a bunch of work. So this is kind of, like I said, another reflection, yet another reflection, another repetition. And this repetition comes from when this is what Genesis 25, I think, is when it was when Abraham's servant goes out to find a wife for Isaac. So this is, going on the next generation. It's interesting how God is doing this. How it's something that almost exactly what happened in the past. It's an interesting event. Yeah, and I want to say, let me see, Genesis 25. So no, it's not Genesis 25. It's Genesis 24. It's Genesis 24 when Abraham goes to serve, and remember, he goes out there, and the servant comes across Rebecca, which is Jacob's mother, and Rebecca waters all of the animals. And when she met the servant, and that servant would ultimately bring her to Isaac. So it's like she's meeting her spouse, kind of at that. It's like a moment of how she met the her spouse. Even though she met the servant, it's like that's how she met him. That God put them in that event, and that's what was so special. So potentially, Rachel had Rebecca had told Jacob this story, and so Jacob could have been playing it out because, as proof to, Laban, and Laban does show up. So that's why Jacob kissed Rachel, lifted up his voice and wept, and he told her, look, he goes, it's a miracle that I made it. I can't believe I made it. I didn't even know I'd be able to. It's a miracle. He lifted up his voice and wept. And he said, I can't believe it. Look, I'm your father's brother. Or he told Rachel that he was her father's brother. And he was Rebecca's son. Oh yeah. It's so he's telling her that about Rebecca, and that he's explaining his relationship to her. So she goes to tell her dad, and her dad is his uncle, which is his mother, Rebecca's brother. So it's, hopefully I'm not getting it too mixed up here, but I'm seeing it, and I hope you could see it too. But there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of relation going on here. And so they hear the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son. So they come to meet him, and he talks to them and tells them everything that's been going on as best he could. And they bring him into his house. And this is just like the servant when he met Rebecca. So now it's kind of backwards. Now we actually got him, instead of it being a servant. Here it is. It's his actual son out here. You know what I'm saying? It's his actual one of the lineage of Abraham. It's not the servant. It's the actual man looking for his wife. And Laban comes and he hears everything, and after he tells him, it basically, yeah, you're that sounds like you're my bone and my flesh. We're related, all right. And so he spends some time there, about a month. And so Laban says, well, you've been here for a while now, and it basically he's realizing, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go back, or you gonna stay here? You want to work for me? What do you want to do? And that's where Laban, he's got the two daughters. He's got Leah being the older, and Rachel. And so we're going to see something kind of, once again, very strange, because we know for a fact that what they're doing here is kind of not going to be the best concept of what's going on here, because, like I said, it was understood that this multiple wives thing was coming from a people outside of Abraham, and so it's been creeping into them, this multiple wives thing. They're not, at least as of right now, they're not running around and taking wives, just like Abimelech was doing, just like the Pharaoh of Egypt was doing. They weren't just running around taking wives. They were, they were single married. Esau was the one acting. That's why Esau had a problem, and he wasn't quite understanding what the problem was. And so it was really because he was starting to act like the people around him. He was acting like the Canaanites. He was acting like the Hittites. He was acting like the people of the land. And those people of the land weren't really the most moral, weren't really the most godly people, just weren't really the best of people. And we remember seeing what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. Um, and let's be honest, the Philistines were really just, they were pretty bad themselves. Is what we're kind of just in the fact about the way, they ran around getting married, multiple wives. So Abraham with his two wives, his one wife and his, Hagar was a, that was a whole big ordeal. But then we see that even after uh, uh, Sarah dies, and Abraham becomes a widow, he takes another wife for himself, Keturah, and he has more children with her after the fact. So he was just a single, one wife, and you see the same thing with Isaac. Just Isaac was just married to Rebecca, uh, and now we're seeing over here though, uh, that Rebecca's family over there, which would have also been kind of related to Abraham as well. From he was Nahor, right? It was Nahor's son. So let me see if I can see this. Yeah, Nahor and Milcah had Bethuel, and Rebecca comes from Bethuel. You see that? But so you see all this lineage going on. But there's some. But well, let me see. Let me see. Where was I getting at? I kind of lost my train of thought suddenly. Yeah, what we're seeing here is that this guy Laban, he's also kind of starting to act like everybody else out in the world. Clearly, what he's going to do is he's going to give this guy two wives. Jacob is going to get two wives, and not only that, they're sisters. So we're going to see something that is known as, this day and age. I'll just go ahead and put it out there. This is something that is kind of taboo. It's very, again, kind of incestual, and it very well, that's just what's going on here. There's some kind of crazy things going on here, and we're gonna see that these people, just even though it's in the Bible and these are God's chosen people, these people are, quite sinful, and they a lot of times they just didn't know any better. They were acting like the evil people, and what we're seeing is that God is going to train these people, and he's going to teach these people, and it's going to culminate in the birth and life of Jesus Christ and his resurrection as a perfect human being. So he's gonna tell the story of what's going on in the world, which is this is what's going on. Like we're saying, ultimately, these guys are probably some of the best guys around. They're some of the most decent guys around, and look how bad they're seriously already messing up, and they're living in a harsh environment. They're living in a harsh life. Much more harsh than we are, and they're making sacrifices, and they're killing animals, they're killing people, it's a much more complicated life, I would say, or a different life than what we know in today's age, unless of course you're one of those crazy, let's be honest, if you're here then and you come from a rough life like that, you may have come from some of the more satanic lineages that have been living hard lives. And so if that's you, then God bless you. Hopefully you break the curses. Pray to God, pray to Jesus. Jesus will be with you if you're here, not just and you're trying to learn, because that's what's going on. These people are some of the most decent guys out there, and we're seeing that they're still doing some pretty messed up stuff, and we'll see some even more messed up stuff, and we'll see some war, and we'll see a lot of things, but we'll see a lot of different. We'll see what God basically says what happened. We'll see, how his people fall away, and when they're doing good and when they're not doing good, and then we'll see how Jesus Christ comes from them, and because of that, that's the promise that is fulfilled, that's going on to these guys, that we are all blessed through Jesus Christ when we get around to the New Testament. But in this meantime, we're still seeing that, look what Laban pushed upon him. He basically uh, Jacob works for 7 years, and he says, hey, I'll work for 7 years for Rachel, for my wife. That's the whole reason I'm here. And it's a pretty big, it's a pretty big price to pay. I mean, if you think about it, when Isaac when the servant showed up for Isaac, I mean, clearly it's kind of showing how rich Abraham must have been, because that servant pulled out just pulled out some some money over here. Is all he did was pulled out some what did he did? An earring, I think, and then he also did a couple of bracelets. So, and then some rubies and gems and stuff like that. So he pulled out a lot of money and basically bought her or paid, because that was kind of the whole deal. They're trying to show they're showing these women how stable they are, how well they could they're trying to show how capable of living they are, because they're showing, look, we're so rich, we're able to dig into the earth, and we're organized enough to make and pull out gold, and we know how to do all of this stuff. So we're stable. Our community is stable. We've got things to do. We've got goods. We've got, we're stable. We're gonna survive, and that's what they're kind of really showing them. That's what he was showing them. And in this case, Isaac shows up, and Jacob shows up, and he doesn't, got all that money apparently. So instead, what he's doing is he works for 7 years. So that's what I mean by how rich Abraham must have been. Show up with all that money, and it accounts for basically, it's probably worth about 7 years to them. That's how much money he probably brought around to these people. And just to take Rebecca home with him over, in 10 days or something. It wasn't even 10 days. It was just overnight. Just showed up and left like that. And so here he comes back, Laban's scene is, oh, wow. Here's what, so he's really kind of, what he ends up doing is he starts taking advantage of Jacob. You can see it already starting to start right now. He said, because he tells him, I'm going to go ahead and let you, work for me for 7 years, and you can have Rachel. And so he does it, and you can see that something's going on here where God is also showing another important lesson, because Jacob really loved this woman. It says, like, it's pretty romantic here that 7 years seemed like a few days, but a few days because of how much he loved her. So he was having a good time. He worked there, and he was hanging out with Rachel. He was having a really good time with Rachel. He loved every minute of it. That's why, 7 years. It was like 7 days. It was just a few days to him. That's how fun it was. That's how much of a good time he was having. So then he's ready to have his wife there. He's ready to have her. And Laban gets her, it's probably a wedding right here. They have a feast. And then in the morning, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her into him. And he went into her. So you see that Laban brings Leah. And Leah kind of does that deal where, it's back in those old days. It was night. The way they do it is he must have switched her out at the last minute there and sent in Leah in the dark. And, she's probably just covered. And so, and then it also says, and Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah for a handmaid. So he says, he gave him the daughter, and he also gave him Zilpah, this other woman, as a handmaid. So you see, Laban's like, here, let me pawn off this woman first to you. And then so in the morning it comes past, he's really upset. Jacob's really upset. Like, what do you? I thought I was getting Rachel. I mean, this whole time we knew it was Rachel. Why have you done this? Why have you beguiled me? Why have you tricked me? And Laban, here's what I was saying, where they're becoming like the other people. And Laban says, it must not be done in our country, so done to give the younger before the firstborn. And he's basically saying, look, normally, you're not supposed to marry the younger before the firstborn. You're supposed to take the firstborn, and so he says, go ahead and just, fulfill her week and give thee, and I will also give. So just marry her just for just a week, just fill out your marriage week and work another 7 years, and I'll give you the other girl. So it was one of those things where it was it was kind of real upsetting for Jacob here. It's getting, he was probably hoping to make it back home, just like God had told him he would make it back home. So now he's really like, oh, those first 7 years were fun. Well, now these next 7 years are a little bit kind of bitter, because now he's married to Leah, but he really loves Rachel, and he's got to do another 7 years to marry her. And so, but he did, and and he also worked another 7 years, and he did it, and he fulfilled. And so Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah. So now it's 14 years later, and he's got two wives because really he wanted to marry this girl, Rachel. So, but you can see he loved Rachel more than Leah. So there's something going on here where God is showing some of his nature, because when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, so for some reason Leah was just just Jacob seems to not have liked her so much. Someone's about her that maybe Rachel was more outgoing, maybe she was more popular, she was maybe funny, laughing, they were giggling, having a good time doing stuff. And Leah, maybe she was a little bit more, introverted, maybe hung around and stayed indoors a lot more. Maybe she was more faithful or something. Maybe she was praying a little bit more. Maybe she was that kind of woman. And Rachel was more of like the party girl, I guess, the likable girl. She gets attention, and Leah maybe doesn't get attention. And it just seems to be the case that for whatever reason, God saw that, hey, Jacob, you got two wives over here. Your first wife was Leah. I mean, God, you got to be paying attention to what God is telling you. Apparently, like you worked over here for this woman Rachel, but you weren't paying attention to what God wanted, and here was Leah before you, and so forth. Like, why wasn't Leah enough? Why did you have to? So God is he's really showing something about favoritism, and so God is saying that Jacob favors Rachel, so that's why he decides to punish Rachel by keeping her barren. But since Leah was hated, or Leah was not as favored, Leah kept every time, it's probably every time that Jacob went to her and slept with her, every single time she conceived, probably, or whatever. Maybe it was that only a few times, whereas Rachel, he was always trying to get Rachel pregnant, but Rachel just wouldn't become pregnant, maybe. And so it's one of those things that so Leah conceives and she has a son, and she has the firstborn, Reuben. So this is Reuben. He would be the heir over here. He's the firstborn of the first wife. Even though, Leah maybe wasn't his favorite wife, that doesn't mean anything. Reuben is the firstborn. He is the heir to everything, is as according to the way they've been establishing these things. But not, so that's why technically Leah is getting the best deal here, because she's the main wife. She gets the main portion. Her son get the main portion of everything that Isaac or Jacob will own. And so that's what, so she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now, therefore, my husband will love me. So now he's got to be like me, because I'm basically everything I'm getting everything that belongs to him in the future. And she has another son, and his name is Simeon. So she's got Reuben, she's got Simeon, she has a third kid, and she calls him Levi. And every time she thinks, you know what? He's gonna love me even more and more every single time. And then look, she even has a fourth son, and his name is Judah, and left bearing. So you can see. Let's take a look when we come here in Jacob over here with Leah, Rachel, and then he'll even have Bilhah later on. But Rachel is the older. I've gotta. I'm always, for some reason, I gotta be careful. But anyway, distractions distracting me from the Bible. But so here you can see Leah over here. She's gonna have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and then you're gonna even see that they're gonna do the exact same thing, they're gonna do these things where they go out and have their servants married Jacob too, so that they could somehow, adopt these children. This is something that Sarah tried with Hagar and Abraham, and she really didn't like it. But we'll see that these two, Leah and Rachel, get so competitive with each other that they also do this thing where they go through these like adoption type situations, these weird ancient adoption situations that we don't necessarily practice today. Hopefully, we're not practicing them, but anyway, so that's what's going on here, and God is really just showing something about who He is and how He looks upon people, because He does say later on, it will read that He doesn't show favoritism towards people. People are all. He looks at us all the same. We're all the same, and we'll see that right here. He's showing that to Jacob because Jacob has got a favorite wife over here, and there's really no reason. Probably Leah was probably just as lovely as Rachel was, but uh, Jacob was kind of doing something that here he is. Once again, he's taking multiple wives, doing something that we will learn that it's not right to do. One wife. It's supposed to be one man and one wife, and here these people are not knowing any better, uh, but they're gonna get taught later on. But right now, God is still showing them what's going on, and He's really, if you think about it, showing them where they're making mistakes, and and it'll be through the form of the laws, and it'll be in the word of Jesus when He comes around, teaching them what it was that God was looking for and expecting, and so forth. But right here, He's showing them that you've got favoritism for somebody, and because you've got favoritism, that person that you hate will be blessed, and that person that you love so much is going to be a little bit cursed over here. You're showing favoritism. Not to show favoritism is what these kings are supposed to be doing nowadays, but that's what's going on here, and I'm going to go ahead and probably end this video right about now. Uh, that was Genesis 29, where we see, like I said, just a recap, is Jacob makes it out to Haran. He's very excited when he gets there. He starts taking some initiative to be, kind of a good worker there. He works there for 7 years to obtain a wife, but he gets kind of like uh, abused here by his boss. He's gonna get kind of how they ripped off over here. He got to work there, but then they give him a wife he didn't want, and he has to work there another 7 years after that. And so you can already see that he's being taken advantage of, is what I mean to say. He's being taken advantage of, and more than that, we're seeing that God, on top of that, is showing him another lesson that has to do with favoritism. So, but yeah, so if you're watching this, I'll go ahead and ask you that you like the video, subscribe to the channel. God bless you, and I pray that we all bless Jesus Christ, and may Jesus Christ bless all of us. Amen.